Well, hey, LCBC, it is so good to have you joining us today for Church Online across the state of Pennsylvania, across the Northeast, and across the entire United States, and actually around the whole world. So welcome. And I would just say in the middle of the crisis, there's no better place to be than with God together as a church family. So Mariah just sang about the faithfulness, about the goodness of God, but sometimes in the middle of a crisis, it's hard to sing. It's hard to even think about the goodness of God when everything around us seems to be spiraling out of control. I mean, who has time to think about the goodness of God? And His goodness can feel so very, very far away. And we are definitely in the middle of a crisis right now. The number of coronavirus cases just increased by the minute, and we can't go to work, and the kids aren't in school, and so we try to work from home, but the kids are bored and restless, and to be honest, there's a lot of good reasons why so many of us chose not to homeschool our kids. And some of us are fortunate because we're still getting paid and paychecks, but we're not sure how long we're going to keep getting paid, or worse yet, for some, maybe you're not getting paid at all, and the bills are piling up, and we're nervous, and we're scared, and we're fearful about what the future holds for us. And then there's just the fear about the destruction that comes with the virus itself. And maybe somebody on your street was just diagnosed with the virus, or maybe somebody in your family, and we're not sure how long all this is going to last or go on. And the anxiety levels just kind of keep going up, and you kind of wonder what's next and what will the future hold. And add to this all the things that were going on before this crisis ever happened. I mean, struggles in your marriage, or sickness at home, or rebellious kids, or a bad work situation. And none of those things have gone away just because there's a crisis unfolding around us. And so, man, no, it's not easy right now to always sing and think about the goodness of God, not with all this going on around us. I mean, this is actually hard. So let me tell you the way I look at life in situations like this. I mean, I always want to know what Jesus would say about my situation. I want to know, what does Jesus have to say about the crisis that we're in right now? And so do you know what I think Jesus would say about the crisis that we're in right now? I think He would say, I know. I'm not surprised. As a matter of fact, I think He would say, you need to expect these kind of things to happen. And one of my favorite verses in the entire Bible actually records the words of Jesus when Jesus said, here on earth, you will have many trials and many sorrows. In other words, Jesus is saying, I know, I'm not surprised by what's going on around you. You need to expect these kind of things to be happening to you. But you and I, we don't expect trials, and we don't expect sorrows to happen. At least we don't expect them to happen to us. And for sure, us in the United States, they just don't happen to us. And so we act surprised when trials come, and maybe hard times fall on other people, but surely not on us. But Jesus says, look, don't be surprised by hard times. You need to expect them. So it always helps me when I'm going through life to look back and learn from others. And history actually tells us about a man who went through incredibly difficult times. And so I want us to go to school on this man's life and see if we can't learn something about how we should respond to what we're experiencing today. This man's name was Job, and Job had a big family, 1 wife, 7 sons, 3 daughters. He was wealthy. He was considered the richest man in his region, and Job actually loved God, and history says that his family got along so well that Job's sons would take turns preparing these huge feasts, and they'd have the rest of the family to their homes, feasts that would sometimes last for several days. In other words, Job and his life was good. It was great for him. And then all of a sudden comes this detour, and it was a violent detour. All on one day, Job found out that storms had wiped out his entire business, collapsed the house where his sons and his daughters, all of their families were feasting, and all of them instantly wiped out. They died, all 10, and their families dead. And so Job gets up one morning, and everything is good. And it's not even just good, it's actually great. And by the end of the day, he's literally lost everything that matters to him. And I look back at the last few weeks and just shake my head thinking, man, how fast have things changed around us? It's been incredibly fast. But for Job, it happened even faster. It happened all in one day. And so that evening, Job is faced with a decision. And the decision that was facing Job is actually a decision that you and I are faced with as well. And we face that same decision today, right now in the middle of our crisis. And here's the decision that we're faced with. The decision is, will I choose to trust God even when everything in my life is going wrong? It's one thing to trust God when everything is going well, but will we choose to lean into God when things are not going well, when things are tough? And Job had to make a decision, and his first response, if we're honest about it, it wasn't all that good. This is what Job initially said in Job chapter 10. He said, I'm disgusted with my life. Let me complain freely. My bitter soul must complain. I'll say to God, don't simply condemn me, God. Tell me the charges you're bringing against me. What do you gain by oppressing me? Why do you reject me, God, the work of your own hands, while smiling on the schemes of the wicked? Job just kind of goes off on God, and he falls into what Henry Cloud calls the 3 Ps. Odds are you're probably experiencing the 3 Ps right now in the midst of our crisis. And the first P is that it gets personal, where we get down on ourselves. I mean, we've been at home with the kids all week long, and you're thinking, I'm disgusting. I mean, I can't teach homeschool to my kids. I can't even teach my kids geometry. And my real job, it's not even considered essential anymore. And I'm just kind of worthless. I'm good for nothing. And all of a sudden, it gets very personal for us. And the second P is that of being pervasive. And getting pervasive is that feeling that begins to grow inside of us, where it just seems like everything is falling apart around us. Nothing is going well. My whole life is falling apart. And so it's personal, it's pervasive. The last P is that we begin to feel like the situation is permanent. It's never going to get better. There's no hope for the future. I mean, we're done. We're toast, and things are never going to get better. Job actually experienced the 3 Ps, and I guess I would ask, how about you? Have you had any of those feelings that you just feel like you're just disgusting, and you just think, I've got no value whatsoever? Have any of those feelings that it just feels like the whole world is caving in around you, or maybe that things are never going to get any better? And so Job, his situation is so bad that he begins to question God. He questions whether or not God can still be trusted. He questions whether or not he really wants to trust God anymore. And you find yourself asking the very same question. You never say it out loud, but your situation is so bad, you're wondering, where is God in all of this? And God, do you even know how bad things are right now? God, do you even care about my situation right now? And things are bad right now. And one of the things that our church staff is doing right now in the midst of all of this is reaching out to every person in the church with a text or an email or through social media. And it's actually been amazing for all of our staff to experience just connecting with so many of you. And so Brad Steele is our campus pastor at our Lancaster City campus. And Brad reached out to a guy named Mark. Mark is a nurse in the Philadelphia area. And Brad was just asking Mark, hey, how are you doing through all of this? And Mark is one of thousands and thousands of healthcare workers who are putting it all on the line right now for you and for me. And I just want you to hear part of Mark's response, because Mark knows that things are really bad right now. And so let me just read you his response to Brad. Mark says, hi, Brad. Thank you for reaching out. It means a lot. I work in Philly's busiest ER, so things are always hectic, but now so more than ever. We're not nearly as close to what New York City is going through. 7 patients on 1 ventilator, using trash bags as gowns and for refrigerator tractor trailers because the morgue is full. But those times are certainly coming. Mark says we're seeing a steady amount of potential probable COVID-19 patients, but it will likely skyrocket to the New York City levels in the near future. That being said, we already have to sign out a face mask that we have to use for the entirety of the shift and continue to use that same mask for multiple days. We're being asked to take care of critically sick patients without using personal protective equipment of our own. The hardest thing for me to wrap my head around is that we're a first world country, yet our supplies and resources are similar to that of a third world country. He said we have to keep our personal protective equipment, what we have of it, behind locked doors because patients are stealing masks, gloves, and gowns by the handful. He goes on, he says, my coworkers are scared for their lives, but even more so for the lives of their kids and their parents, and they're petrified that they're going to bring the virus home to their families. And so my coworkers are sending their kids off to their grandparents' homes and having to say goodbye for 60 days to ensure their kids' safety. And again, he says, this is all before the storm. I tell you these stories to give you a picture of what we're experiencing and keep things in perspective, to share with those who may not take seriously social distancing or quarantine. He concludes by saying, you ask what you can pray for. Please pray for the safety of our healthcare workers, that we are provided proper personal protective equipment so that we can safely take care of our patients. I also ask that people be kind to all healthcare workers as they are sacrificing their lives to help get us through this. Again, thank you for reaching out. And all Mark is saying is that things are bad right now. It's tough. It's a tough time that you and I are experiencing. And things were bad for Job. And so Job did what a lot of us would do. Maybe we've been doing it even right now. Job questions whether he could even trust God anymore. And so he asks a lot of questions, and he questions God. And after a long, long time, God responds to Job's questionings. And God actually says a number of things to Job. You can find them in Job 38. But God says, "Who is this that questions my wisdom with such ignorant words? Brace yourself like a man, because I have some questioning for you, and you must answer them." And then God begins to answer and pepper Job with a number of questions. "Where were you," God says, "when I laid the foundation of the earth? Who kept the seas inside its boundaries as it burst from the womb? Have you ever commanded the morning to appear and caused the dawn to rise from the east?" God said, "Can you direct the movement of the stars?" God said, "Who gives intuition to the heart and instinct to the mind?" Do you still want to argue with the Almighty? Are you God's critic? But do you have the answers? And God is just peppering Job with question after question after question. They just keep coming and coming and coming. And you could almost sit back and accuse God and say, "God, it seems like you're being a little bit harsh on Job, especially after all that he's just been through." But God's questions all came with a purpose. And God's purpose was to remind Job of who's really in control. It's God that's in control. It's not Job that's in control. And finally, God stops. And there's a silence. And after a time of silence, Job replies to God. You can see it in Job 42. Job says this. He says, "I know that you can do anything, God, and no one can stop you. You ask, 'Who is this that questions my wisdom with such ignorance?' It is I. And I was talking about things that I knew nothing about, things far too wonderful for me. You said, 'God, listen, and I will speak. I have some questions for you, and you must answer them.' I had only heard of you before, but now I've seen you with my own eyes," Job says. "I take back everything that I said, and I sit in dust and ashes to show my repentance." Like you and me, Job needed to make a decision about God. Could God be trusted, even when everything is going wrong around us? And so finally, Job makes a decision. Through this crisis, Job had learned that, yes, he could trust in the goodness and the faithfulness of God and the power of God in spite of the circumstances around him. And Job concluded that God is sovereign and God is worthy to be followed in whatever God chooses to do. Bottom line, Job had to enlarge his concept of who God is. And Job came to realize that even though God's ways are sometimes incomprehensible to us, God can always be trusted. Now, like Job, in the middle of this crisis, this detour that you and I are on, you and I have a decision to make. Can we trust God even when everything in life is going wrong? And Job made his decision. Job decided, yes, I can trust God because God is so much greater, more majestic than Job ever imagined God to be. But now it's our crisis, and it's our storm, it's our detour, and it's also our choice. It's our decision. Will we continue to trust God? So, let me go back to one of my favorite verses, John 16:33. We read it earlier. Jesus said, "Here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows," which sounds pretty depressing on the surface. And you're thinking, David, how could this possibly be one of your favorite verses? And well, here's why it's one of my favorite verses, because it's the rest of the verse that I love when you put the two together. Jesus said, "Here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart, because I have overcome the world." And what I love about this verse is how honest and frank Jesus is in the first part of the verse. I love his authenticity. I mean, he could have blown smoke at us. He could have told us that life is always going to be easy. It's always going to be good, but it's not. And it won't always be easy. And so Jesus is real, but then Jesus ends with hope. He says, you will struggle, but don't worry. I've got this. Things are going to get tough, but don't lose heart because I will be victorious. Or maybe it's the way I first learned this verse. Maybe you learned it this way. It sounded like this. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, for I, Jesus says, have overcome the world. So, like Job, we each have to make our own decision. For me, here's my decision. My decision is this: God's ways sometimes are incomprehensible to me, but God can always still be trusted. So that's my decision. And What's your decision? See, after all that he had experienced, Job was a changed man. And can I just tell you my hope for you and for me, for each of us in the midst of this crisis that you and I are going through? My hope is that we will be different people after this crisis than before. And in other words, my hope is that when we come through this crisis, you and I truly will be lives that have been changed by Jesus Christ through this crisis. Because see, you and I are more open to change during a crisis than any other time. And so don't waste this crisis. In this crisis, let's allow Jesus to change us. Let's truly be lives that have been changed by Christ. And can I just say we will come through this. And when? I don't know. And what will things look like on the other side? I don't know. But just because we don't know, that's okay. Remember, God's ways are sometimes incomprehensible to me, to you, but we will come through this because God can always be trusted. So, when I was a little kid, there was a song that we used to sing at church all the time, and I love singing this song, and it's a song that very simply states how we're to respond in times of crisis. And if you grew up in church, you probably know, and you love the song like me. And the words actually go like this. It says, "O soul, are you weary and troubled, no light in the darkness you see? Then turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in light of his glory and grace." And so I've asked Matt and the team to come back and sing as we close. And can I just tell you this week, no matter what circumstances arise in your life, remember to turn your eyes upon Jesus. And you look full in his wonderful face, because you and I, we can trust him regardless of the circumstances around us. You can trust him regardless of the circumstances around you, even when you don't see him working, even when you don't feel like he's working. You can, because God has overcome the world.
Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Oh, turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Oh, we fix our eyes on you, Jesus. Oh, we believe that you are good. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. the darkness, my God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, mending every heart. I worship you, I worship you. Oh, you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. 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 Jesus, that is who you are. That is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. That is who you are. Oh, that is who you are, Jesus. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. The waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. 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 Oh, that is who you are. 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 Jesus. You are faithful, you are true. You are good, we can trust in you. You're the same yesterday, today, and forever. Yes, you are. That is who you are. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never never stop working. You never stop working.
So LCBC, in the midst of the uncertainty, in the midst of just changing instantly the circumstances around us, in the midst of your frustration of life, don't let anxiety get control. Don't let fear capture you. Instead, turn your eyes upon Jesus, because he can be trusted. He has overcome the world, and God is faithful, and he is the way maker, and he can lead us through. And so LCBC this week, let's not be discouraged. Instead, let's turn our eyes upon Jesus. If you'd like somebody to pray with you today, right now, even the chat line on the screens will remain open for the next 10 minutes or so. And so stick around and let us know how we can pray for you. Or you can go to the website anytime during the week and click on the prayer button and let us know how we can be praying for you. And let me just say about next week. Next week is Palm Sunday weekend. And every year, Palm Sunday weekend, we take communion together. And next weekend is no different. We're going to take communion together. But this time, you provide the bread and you provide the drink. And so you need to be thinking now about what you're going to serve and how you're going to serve it, and have it ready to go before the gathering next week, and then we'll see you next week. And thanks for being here. May God bless you and watch over you, and may you experience his peace this week, because God can always be trusted.